Hello everybody, welcome back to Motor Mouth, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra, and this is Dan.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi again.
So hopefully you caught the last episode that we did, which was about our 1907 Dragon that we're standing here. We talked about the history of the company and a little bit about some of the things you can notice on our vehicle in particular. And you brought up a name when you were giving the company history. And I think we want to learn more about Mr. Joe Tracy.
Joe Tracy, right, okay. And as I said in the previous thing, he was known as a race driver back in the 1900s.
Yes.
What do they call that? Is it 1900s?
The aughts.
The aughts.
The aughts.
1900s, okay.
And Dragon hired him
Yes.
to do essentially
Consulting engineer.
Consulting work, yeah.
Right, yes.
So,
very good.
but he had already retired.
You're paying from racing, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So here it is. We got Joe Tracy, who was a race driver and engineer. He was born in Ireland back in 1873. Wow. 1873, that's when that car was made, right?
Wow.
The Hill car? Okay.
Anyway,
so 1873, 1891, he's 18 years old, came to the United States. He eventually became an American citizen, all right? Soon after that, he became a professional chauffeur and race driver. That's where the race driver was, okay?
Young.
Yeah, well, 18, you figure, you know, I guess.
In today's world, it seems very young, but back
is.
then, that's what
It
you
is,
did. You
yeah.
had to go out and work.
Work, okay. And you figure, you know, I look at it, if you are having trouble with your computer, who do you go to?
A kid.
A kid. Back then, cars were these newfangled ideas, and they were probably doing the same thing. It's like, well, you know, ask your son. He knows how to do this.
Get these young
he knows how to
rapscallions
drive.
to figure it out.
And it reminds me of a story Paul Hafer told me, Paul Hafer, who founded the museum, telling me when he was 12 years old, his dad asked him to teach him how to drive. And it's just, it was a terrific story. So again, you know, and that was like 1920-ish.
Yeah.
There, so.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So yeah, it's a different world.
It is
sort
totally.
of. Okay.
Totally.
So around 1899, he got a steam engineer's license. Okay. Now, right before we started doing this segment here off camera, we were talking about steam engines. And there's a steam car that we need in this museum here, okay? And then we got talking about other things. And, you know, here it is. Joe Tracy has his background in steam vehicles here.
Wow.
So he got his steam engineer's license around 1899. He received his engineering certificate for operating steam boilers while he was working at Locomobile, who at that time were building steam cars, all right?
Steam car manufacturer.
Coincidentally, that same license was required for him to operate a steam-powered locomobile, which I'm not quite sure, is it powering as a engineer
like
or
just drive it? Like,
I don't
did you
really
need a
know.
special license to drive a steam car?
I didn't think so.
I didn't think so either.
But,
That's
you know,
interesting.
But I guess being an engineer, it didn't bother him because, here we go. Yeah. So he was also an early member of the SAE, which is Society of Automotive Engineers, which is, you know, great. They're big with all the standards and stuff that we see today. And the SAE in 1900, they had a desire. There was a group of engineers out there, and they wanted to have a free exchange of ideas to solve technical design problems and develop engineering standards. So that's where all that started. And that was 1900. 4 years later, the Society of Automotive Engineers formed. One of the president of it was Andrew Riker, who was in charge of
automobile.
Well, he was in charge of Locomobile also.
Oh.
I also wonder if he had anything to do with Rikers Island in New York City.
They're all over the place.
I think it's a hospital. Anyway, the vice president was Henry Ford, which I thought was interesting too. 1909, the society was officially incorporated, membership around 400. 2 years later, now it was about 1,000 members.
Wow.
So it was really growing. And that's standards, and I'm thinking, well, it's hard to see on this car because, you didn't have standards. But I'm thinking, maybe left side driving versus right side driving.
It's interesting too because I didn't realize it started that early, the SAE, but it makes sense too in a way that like they're trying to solve problems together almost, it sounds like. I mean, we see it in the cars here. There's so many different approaches to what they're doing. So I guess it would be nice to have all these other people that are trying this too, and you'll get together. What worked for you, what didn't, and just kind of, other people that are tackling these problems, same as you are.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. I didn't know it started that early.
Well, there you go. Now you know that.
Gotta learn something new today.
All right. Anyway, back to Joe Tracy here. In 1904, he participated in the Daytona Beach tournament, driving a Peerless car. 1905, he drove in the Gordon Bennett race in France. He was in a Locomobile, completed 2 laps, and he dropped out. His greatest racing successes were driving Locomobiles at the Vanderbilt Cup races held on Long Island. He was the only driver to participate in the first 5 races associated with this historic series. 1904, 1905, and 6, and there was elimination races as well as the Cup races, so he was in them. Best race out of all of them was in 1905 in the Vanderbilt Cup race. He got a 3rd place. In 1906, he got a 1st place. All 5 races, his sidekick, his passenger, his mechanician was Al Poole, who ended up going to Dragon with him. Okay, so
they're a buy one get one free deal, I guess.
yes. So he was racing Vanderbilt Cup race in 1906. That's when he retired.
Okay.
The end of the year, he retired as a race driver. Next year, 07, he became consulting engineer for Dragon Automobile Company, which is this. Okay.
He envisioned some of the stuff on this car.
That's right.
Pretty
okay.
Cool.
1911, around 1911, he created and sold a thing he developed called the Tracy dynamometer, which kind of measures the power, the torque, the horsepower, all that stuff of an engine. And they're well known today. Not the Tracy thing, but he was big in doing that, and that was 1911-ish. In 1916, he became chairman of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. But that's kind of besides the point. But the whole dynamometer thing, the dyno, okay, they call them dynos, okay? The whole thing with that is he really, I think, really enjoyed, he was an engineer. He worked with steam with the Locomobile. He worked gasoline powered here. We're going to look at that later in our next segment. Experimenting different types of fuels, different types of engines, all sorts of things. He had a dyno to measure the power of an engine, and there's a lot of stuff out there. I didn't look, but I would almost guarantee there's a book about him out there of his life, because there's a lot of stuff, and his name kept popping up. Sure. I tried focusing kind of on this era here, the 1900s. Got it then. Okay. And anyway, so that's Joe Tracy. So, we gave you earlier about the Dragon Company, and now, I'm thinking that the main force behind the company, maybe not the main force, but the main design engineering force behind this. So.
Yeah, I was going to say at least from a technological point, I would say he's the main force.
Yeah. So he was only with them for like a year or so.
Well, the company was only around for maybe another couple months after he left.
Yep. And the thing is, as I mentioned, he was with Locomobile, he was with Peerless, he was with Dragon. There was a couple other names that I came across that he was involved with also. So yeah, he was bouncing around. Even when he was working for Locomobile, he was driving this Peerless down in Daytona. So, you know, I guess his contract, no, you are working as an engineer.
Yeah.
But you can go race some other brand, you know. I guess. I don't know how.
Well, I mean, I would think as he was a big celebrity in racing for the time too. So, you know, as long as he can physically do it, he seemed the type that wanted to keep doing it. Probably look good for a company like Dragon or Peerless to say, hey, that famous racing guy is on our team, you know?
Right. And the early Dragon advertising, you know, they mentioned him. I mentioned that earlier in an advertisement, showed him in a picture with him and Al Poole. And it actually mentions that you know, that's who we're looking at. So, yeah. So people knew who he was.
They sure did.
Okay, anyway, so that's what I have to say about Joe Tracy.
And that's Joe?
That's Joe.
Now, you're going to have to join us. We're going to have one more episode
about
our dragon.
About dragons and stuff.
Well, yeah, I should say that. It's not our specific dragon.
Yeah.
But it is going to talk about Joe Tracy, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because he did something a little wild and crazy.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Back then, it was a little wild and crazy.
Yeah, a little wild and crazy, yeah.
With a dragon. So join us next time, and we're going to talk about that. In the meantime, please come visit us at the Boyertown Museum and check out this really cool car.
Okay.
So we'll see you next time.